Well, hello and welcome everyone to this session on building the 6G value proposition. My name's Camille Mender. I'll be your moderator today. I'm from Omdia, the consulting company focused on the digital economy. But joining me today is a very distinguished range of panelists. And our job is really to review what we mean by the value proposition. Now, how would you put together a value proposition? You have to ask yourself a number of questions. One is, what is the customer? Who is the customer you're trying to address? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What service are you going to be developing? What does it match up? For all of the panelists who will be joining today, we'll be reviewing the customers, the problems to solve, the service, the competition, and what we will pay potentially for this type of service. Now, joining me in this very distinguished panel, we have different stakeholders in the 6G ecosystem. Let me start by first asking them to introduce themselves. Let's start with the Honorable Lisa McLean, who is the Congresswoman for the 10th Congressional District in the state of Michigan. We're delighted you could join us. Tell us a little bit more about your involvement in the digital economy and the 6G world. And hopefully, if we cannot get the Congresswoman online, we will move to our next speaker as we get her connected. Let me ask, I think you're on mute, Lisa. This is what happens in
Here we go.
Recording live. Welcome, Lisa.
How are you?
We're very well. We're delighted to welcome you here.
Thank you. I didn't hear your question. I literally just walked in from another meeting.
And you're keeping yourself busy, and that's great. Your various voters will be happy for that. What we were saying is that we're just doing introductions. We're very interested in understanding how you're involved in the digital economy and, of course, getting involved in this emerging 6G world.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I've never been in politics before, so I think that can serve me very well. I've spent 30 plus years in the business industry, so I'm used to taking things from concept to prototype to mass production. And I think when you think about 6G, that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? We're thinking about how do we connect at a much greater speed all areas of technology. So really right now we're in the conceptual thought process of how we delve into the 6G world. And I think as a member of Congress, what I'm excited about is I think we have a lot of opportunity for R&D. And that's really what this is, right? We have an analogy. Hockey is very big. In Michigan, we're very close to Canada. So hockey in Michigan is very big. And we always talk about so many people in business always skated, right, to where the puck was. So if the puck went to the corner, that's where everyone skated to. What we said was the major business players and the really good business players always skated to where the puck was going. And that's what 6G is when you think about 6G is where are we going? We have a lot of these concepts and we just need to continue to take these concepts and funnel them down so we can begin to develop a prototype. It's just crooked, sorry. I look like I'm cockeyed. So with Congress, I'm very excited to see how important that technology is. And believe it or not, a lot of people are very interested in technology, in connectivity, in all things R&D, because for as bad of a rap sometimes that Congress gets, we do fund a lot of projects of R&D. So I'm excited to be on, the Armed Services Committee, the Education and Labor Committee, but we do have a lot of thoughts going around. And I can tell you 6G is definitely one of those. And I'm happy to be a part of this.
Fantastic.
So thank you.
And I'll come back to you on the education and skills issue in a moment. Now, you mentioned our great neighbor in Canada, and we have at least one representative from another North American country from Canada. Let me ask Javan to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the many hats that you wear representing the 6G ecosystem.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. It's a pleasure to be here and among such a distinguished peer panelists, as well as the audience. And, you know, I work at Bell Canada in wireless technology strategy and strategic direction as such, working with the global industry and research community as well, you know, including those represented on this panel, such as NGMN and ATIS. At NGMN, of course, you know, we have been working on different generations, 4G, 5G, and now we published our view of drivers and vision in April and continue working on the next steps. You know, we also see this as positioning for, say, the next decade and all that needs to be done, you know, whether at research, ITUs, and ecosystem working together synergistically to do that. So there is also a level of orchestration of this effort and guidance working together. It's not at the expense of the what we need to do for 5G in the coming years, but also what needs to be done for taking it further. Thank you.
Okay. Great, and we'll return to that topic in a moment, but let's introduce the other two panelists. Dale, would you introduce yourself and what you do at InterDigital?
Sure, thanks Camille. Yeah, hello everyone. Again, my name is Dale Seed. I'm a principal engineer at InterDigital. I'm more focused, of course, on the R&D side. InterDigital is more of an R&D company. So me personally, I'm focusing in on the 5G and 6G research and development with a specific emphasis. I tend to be more involved on the IoT, the Internet of Things type of technologies in those domains. I also participate on several industry standards bodies, including 3GPP, the NextG Alliance, 1M2M, as well as ETSI. In the 1M2M standards body, I have had a few different leadership positions over the years. Currently, I'm serving as the vice chair of the 1M2M technical plenary. I also chair the 1M2M sustainability subcommittee. In these roles, one of the areas I've been recently focusing in on is how to deploy IoT, 5G, and 6G technologies in a more sustainable manner, as well as how do these technologies have a positive impact in helping us achieve our sustainability goals, which is becoming more and more of a popular topic these days around the globe and around the world. So with
and
that,
indeed, one of the benefits that people talk about around 6G. Okay, great. We'll come back to you on that topic too. Now, let me turn to our last, but certainly not least panelist, and that's Jeremy, who also wears a number of different hats, not just at NextG, but some other activities. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're involved in the 6G ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Pleasure to be part of the panel. I appreciate it. My name is Jeremy Naser. I lead device hardware strategy at Verizon. And I'm also vice chair of the Societal and Economic Needs Working Group within the ATIS NextG Alliance. So in that respect, we're focused on identifying the 6G social and economic drivers, making recommendations for how this should influence 6G R&D and deployment. So very focused on the groundbreaking work that we're doing in 6G. And I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Now, as we said in the introduction, building a value proposition, you have to answer a number of questions. And perhaps one of the most important questions is, who indeed is the customer? Who is going to benefit most from 6G? Is there one group that's going to benefit most than another to begin with? How will that change over time? Love to hear from the panel what they believe are going to be the initial beneficiaries and how that's going to change over time. Let me throw that over. Actually, let me ask you, Jeremy, what your thoughts are regarding that. Then I'll move to the other panelists.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think 6G will benefit all parts of society, really, from enterprises looking to transform the way they do business, to the education sector, to the consumer, who will get to take advantage of everything that the new applications of 6G will bring. At Verizon, we're constantly focusing on the customer. So thinking about concerns from their perspective really makes sense at this point. So I believe the consumer is where we'll see the most impact. There's just so much coming with 5G right now that is currently transforming the way we live. What will be there a decade from now is really hard to conceive, but it'll definitely open up possibilities like we've never seen before.
Okay, so your vote is that consumers will be the initial beneficiaries. Congresswoman, what is your view when you think about a technology like 6G? There's who you want to benefit first and those that are most likely to benefit first. What are your thoughts initially?
Well, I think when you have a breakthrough like 6G, I think it's very difficult to discriminate, because I believe everyone, I mean, I look at my district, and if we can get this 6G, this will be critical. I have a very rural district, and the internet connections are terrible, and people, it's just awful. Cell service is terrible. So I think for me, I'm excited about that. I also think there'll be another huge benefactor, and I think that's business. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I come from a business background, but businesses are usually on the cutting edge and more accepting of a 6G. So I think you have two things. Is I think you have to have the actual product itself, but I also think you have to have the willingness to accept it and implement it and be one of the early adapters. And I believe businesses will be more of an early adapter. That's my thought.
Okay, and what about you, Javan? What are your thoughts regarding who's going to benefit first from maybe from a Bell perspective?
Yes, more or less, I'm going to echo the same statement. There's hard to discriminate. It's everybody. You know, we and also other operators at NGMN, we are targeting everyone, and in fact more than today. So this is a true statement that we need more inclusion of everybody, and that's not because of a certain policy. It also takes all the technologies, all the possibilities, all the feasibilities, all new enablers to do that for coverage and inclusion, hyper connectivity. So and also we note that paradigms change, right? That, for example, definition of home has changed in the last 2 years. Like it's consumer, it's telework, it's telehealth. So we also have to consider those paradigms. Thank you. You're on mute.
That's an excellent point. And it's something that Jeremy said about 5G and how 5G is changing society right now. And certainly when it comes to 6G, and any technology development, we stand on the shoulders of others. And I think it'd be important to speculate perhaps how today's technology will condition business and consumers to expect something different. I mean, we're now in towards the end of 2021, 5G is being rolled out. Can you speculate what this is going to mean in terms of, in a few years' time, what that consumer and business is going to expect? Dale, I know that you're working very hard in developing some of the and bringing out some of the new standards and developments, pushing forwards that 6G vision. What are your thoughts about what that would look like and how that will condition, how today's market will condition that future consumer and business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a bit blurry, probably for the next few years. I mean, I think the story's still being written about 5G. I think where we're at with 5G is a lot of the research and development has gone into the technology, and the benefits of that are going back to your last question just a bit, but I think the infrastructure and the operators have seen a massive overhaul of the core networks with 5G. They've been now virtualized. They're now, it's basically service oriented. So I think what we'll see probably over the next few years now is the benefits of those networks being rebuilt, now pushing out to the end consumers, and the end consumers will now see the value of all that investment, all that research, and all that money that was invested. So I think the market will now start to evolve, and we'll start to see if the promises of 5G to the end consumer can be realized or not in 5G. If they can, then I think it's going to be a great thing. If they can't, then I think 6G will kind of then step in and kind of hopefully deliver on those promises, maybe where 5G comes up a bit short. So I think we're all kind of probably expecting that those promises of 5G were probably a little bit oversold, so 6G will have to come in. We'll have to do a bit more work in the next generation to deliver on that, as well as deliver and hit that next bar of a level of experience for the users. So that's kind of.
And yet, if you start delivering, things can change very quickly, right?
Yeah.
I'm just considering that, a year ago, enterprises, I know we spoke to around 5,000 enterprises around the world, North America and about 60 different countries. And a year ago, the number one benefit of 5G at the time was to reduce reliance on fixed connectivity, whereas this year, we're getting answers such as, well, we will now automate more of our processes. We will deliver, support our workers in different ways. We will deliver new digital experiences. So it strikes me that the ball has started rolling and changing opinion, and I think it's going to continue to spin. So, I think from the Congresswoman's perspective, there are higher standards to achieve to deliver value, right? And that's perhaps what will happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I take a look at the mindset of the consumer, the user. We are, by nature, we want immediate gratification. I think we are used to having instant results, and we're spoiled from that respect, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But if you look at how quickly, once it begins to change, I don't see things changing in this progressive world. I see it leaping to the next level. And I give you an example of Amazon. I just look at how Amazon has changed the retail business. You go to a mall or a shopping center, half the stores are vacant because they can order it on Amazon and get it shipped the next day. So I think it's all about convenient and instant results.
So we are conditioning a very impatient consumer, and that means businesses must respond in that way, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you took a look at how we lived before 4G, right, we couldn't do most of the things that we do with today's smartphones. Social media, video streaming, none of that was possible. We could never go back there. So in the same way, when you look at 5G, we're getting gigabits per second in your handset today. Latency is coming down. The lag is going to be non-existent. When we think about what that'll be years from now, it'll be table stakes. And 6G will just continue to set expectations. We could never go back.
Okay, so we've started answering some of this. We think that everyone can benefit, consumers and businesses. We believe that some of the issues to solve are about impatience and delivery of experience. It's less for Congresswoman McClain, connectivity is still an issue, but maybe once connectivity is solved, it's more about experience. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. Everyone is expecting the connectivity, but now it's the level of expectation and their patience. We want everything bigger, stronger, faster, quicker.
So now let's talk about, can we actually imagine what some of those services are going to be, the problems that are going to be solved if we start having a zero latency environment? When the connectivity is there, it's ubiquitous already. What sort of issues can we address? Let me throw this over. It's an easy question, of course, to answer. That's why we're having this whole session about it. I'm being ironic. Javan, let me throw it over to you to ideate a little bit. Where do you think we're going to deliver the most value? Is it solving the problem of autonomous vehicles? I know that's one of the comments here is about autonomous vehicles. What's in your view going to be a very compelling 6G service?
Well, first, broadly, I am going to state what we published in our drivers, as I think that's important because, as many have also fortunately talked about this in the ecosystem and contributions to ITU, it's important to address societal problems and some of the UN Development Program initiatives, and including digital inclusion, well-being, and so on. And a lot of this, as I said, is not about something somebody didn't do, now they have to do. It takes everything to do it, including feasibility, including efficiency, including energy efficiency, and possibilities to new possibilities in terms of, for example, hyperconnectivity, 3D coverage, ubiquitous, service, and so on. Impatience should also be a little qualified, because when it comes to something which is a little non-real time, like logging in, there's impatience. Like when I started, I would take a few days to get back like my Fortran responses. But now in a few seconds, I want to log in. But a lot of new use cases like remote operation, autonomous, platooning of trucks and other things do require, or mixed reality do require instant response. So I would say societal, differentiated market opportunities with incentives. We are going to evolve 5G, and there's a lot of evolution, as you mentioned, the ball is spinning or rolling, you mentioned, but also as Congresswoman rightly said, there is also that level of change. So there's market opportunities end to end, and also operational efficiency, managing, because that's not just technical. How do you develop, create, and deliver value? That's important. That's how we can reach out to everybody. So this all works together, I would suggest. Thank you.
Okay, I would perhaps challenge a couple of things. So, logging in, surely that will be a completely defunct concept in a 6G world. Why would you need to log in when your identity is constantly validated, right? Because we'll have facial identification. You won't have to log in. You'll be able to walk into a building because it already knows who you are, right?
Yes.
Isn't that one of the future? So you're going into a sports venue or you're going to an airport. We don't have to go through all the tedious security. Isn't that a potential use case that excites many of us? I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, but that's one of the first things that comes to mind. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, no, I'm fine with that, because the reason I use that example traditionally, not for 6G, was to qualify what we mean by impatience. Because when, for example, for an autonomous intelligent operation, remote control, or drones around buildings, we need instant reaction. That I may not qualify as impatience. It may be a requirement. So just wanted to qualify that, but you're absolutely right on that point. Thank you.
So who else wants to explore this idea of near zero latency, the idea of not having to do these transactional things like proving identity or status or health or anything of that nature? Jeremy, do you have any thoughts? I would imagine that a lot of what Verizon's doing is very related to this, addressing this challenge, right?
Yeah, well, I'll make one comment on kind of what you mentioned here, because it's a topic that we're working through at the Societal and Economic Needs Working Group. It's not only security enhancements, like you mentioned, additional ways that you can do verification of identity and such, but it's also privacy. Privacy today is a big concern for the population, and the consumer needs to be confident that the technology that's coming is going to protect their privacy. And that's something that we're working towards, and it's going to be a big initiative kind of going forward with 5G and into 6G. So that's one thing that I wanted to bring up.
Congresswoman, I'm sure you have a comment on that as well.
And going back to your original question, I see this serving us very well in the healthcare industry. I agree with Jovan, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, sir, I believe we'll also get a lot of operational efficiencies. And there will be a lot of redundancies that are eliminated. But I also think there's a huge opportunity in the healthcare industry, where it's with, whether it be with medical records or, you know, piggybacking on what you said is, I come into the emergency room, they already have me identified before I get to the emergency room. They may know what medication I'm on, what I'm allergic to. It's already there prior to me even getting to the emergency room. You know, that's a little ways out, but I can see that happening. Not to mention the importance of the telehealth. One of the things that we've been talking about in Congress was, you know, COVID did teach us some things. The medical practice, the medical field is a little bit behind in terms of access and efficiencies for the patient. And with the telehealth, I mean, that we removed a lot of barriers during COVID. We could get our medical care quicker. Now we just have to add quality, right? So it's not just a quick fix, but it's also the qualitative importance of our medical history. So I see a big opportunity there as well.
Now, Dale, you're one of the folks who's ideating a lot in this space. What are your thoughts? What are your dreams, your aspirations for what 6G can deliver?
Well, you know, I think a nice use case and a nice area that I think is going to continue to grow is just the whole idea behind devices becoming more aware of their surroundings, as well as aware of the users that are using the devices. For example, devices are able to detect if a user is in a familiar environment or a user is somewhere new and where they haven't been before. And in that case, you know, maybe the device is able to detect if the user needs assistance, if they're looking for a particular person, place, or object, maybe a product in a store. The device is going to take a more proactive role in helping the user to find what they need. One example I like to talk about with friends when they're not really technology savvy is, I think everybody can kind of relate to, if you're watching a football game these days, whether it's a Super Bowl or whatnot, if you're seeing that yellow line that gets printed on the field that marks the first down marker on the field, just think about how that could be extrapolated in the future, right? That's helping us know where the first down is in a football game. But if you take that into your everyday life, let's say you're in a shopping mall, you're in a hospital, maybe a grocery store, and you're trying to find a particular product, or maybe a family member that you separated from in the store, or perhaps a room, you know, in a hospital. Wouldn't it be great if you could have that yellow line kind of just direct you to whatever you're looking for, and it'd be instantaneous? You know, sure, we kind of have that capability with our GPS devices. You know, when we're in our car, you know, we're driving around thanks to Google Maps and GPS. But in order for this to actually, you know, be extended to our everyday lives and be used for all the other activities where we're looking for stuff, it's going to take some more technology and some more evolution. You know, some high precision indoor localization and ranging functionality, and things of that nature to really kind of get us to that next frontier of making that reality. So I think, again, just having devices that are more user aware and aware of their surroundings and more proactively interacting with us is going to be pretty interesting and very useful. Yeah.
And those devices, of course, will help us build different types of experiences, right? As well as the precision and safety from hyperlocation. Be it if you're a first responder, knowing where people are in a building with absolute precision, which we cannot do today. That's, I think, an important area we haven't covered. And speaking of experiences, we've talked previously, people talk about immersive, extended reality, augmented reality. And what I find interesting is we talk a lot about it in the context of consumer, like sports, gaming, e-gaming. But if you speak to businesses, as Congresswoman McClain does with her business background, I've seen businesses report absolute benefits that they're trying to achieve through use of immersive environments, such as in construction, better buildings, better quality buildings, or safer transportation because someone has checked the track Now we do this with heavy lifting. With 6G, this becomes automatic, correct? And that's exciting. But it's not just about consumers, right? So, Jeremy, from your perspective, I know you're doing a lot of work in the IoT space, and thinking from a Verizon perspective, Verizon's been doing a lot of work around the safety and security of this connected environment. It's worth, before we move into some other topics, it's worth touching on this important point of security. As much as we may enhance safety and security in some aspects, we open ourselves up a little bit more as we connect more objects and people through 6G. So is that one of the foundational issues that we need to address to progress 6G for the future?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It has to be a way of thinking prior to the technology creation, right? And I think that's one of the good things that we have with 6G today and what we're doing in the ADAS Next G Alliance. We're thinking about the needs of society before the technology is created. And that's something that cellular technology has not done in the past, right? In the past, we had some use cases and we addressed some needs of what the consumer would like, and we wrote technology requirements around that. Now we're kind of bringing in what society needs. What are the concerns society has? What are the economic drivers that we have to consider 10 years down the road? We're putting that up front so the technology developers can think about that before they actually put things in motion. And that's something that is absolutely different this time and will absolutely benefit North America.
And to that point, actually, it's 6G, of course, is not just about the technology, it's about those societal factors and delivering new experiences. And what that means perhaps also is developing new types of skills. What kind of skills do we need to progress that digital economy, that 6G powered economy going forwards? Congresswoman McLean, what are your thoughts about what kind of skills we're going to need to have in schools, in colleges, at work? What we'll need to develop in this type of environment to make sure it's successful?
Well, I think we have a tremendous opportunity right now. As I sit on the Education and Labor Board, one of the committees in Congress, is we have a real deficiency on what we're producing at the college level in terms of what the consumer or the businesses need. So I think we're gonna have to peel back our college degrees right now. And because that's where it all starts. We can't have all these ideas. We have to start preparing now for skilled trades, cybersecurity, our AI world. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. And if you think about it, those are the think tanks. When, I often say our kids think about stuff we don't even think about, right? Because they see things from a different lens. And that's what's so exciting right now. It's no different than you hear joke all the time. Someone my age, if I can't figure out my phone or my computer, who do I ask? I ask my 5-year-old, I ask my child. And I think there's a lot of appetite for this. You look at all the video games and how interested they are and how far they've gone. I think we have a real opportunity because I think the appetite is there. And I think the need is there because the education system, quite frankly, is a little stale right now. So those are things that I'm very excited about and that I'm pushing on the Education Committee in Congress, because we need to think 5, 10, 15 years down the road. We got to start planning now.
Certainly, if you look at the telecoms industry, the transformation there has been agile, DevOps, understanding the cloud environment, the cloud model.
Yes.
The Congresswoman mentioned AI. That's a set of skills that we're trying to develop. Now, each one of you on this panel is an employer. What are you seeking? What do you anticipate in terms of what you need to hire in? Because that's a very good point. You need to hire in now, and then you've got to think about what you're going to need in the next 5 years or so. Javan, please, I'd love to hear what what your thoughts are.
Sure, appreciate that. As it was very well said, of course, it starts with the end value, right? The experience, the quality, the inclusion, the new opportunities and so on. As such, of course, as you said, agility has been front and center for us and others, such as what Jeremy has been representing. But in that light, of course, agility requires, for example, disaggregation of networks. It's about digital transformation when it comes to the knowledge, and it takes everything.
And so, what should people study? What type of skills should they have?
Yes, within. First of all, it's the inspiration, like why, like the value, and as such, it will spread into everything. From, let's say, ICT perspective, there is all this, green technology. There are all the new software and the new disaggregation in every direction, cloud technologies and so on. But it also takes art and design and applications, right? The mixed reality, interaction. AI is an important one you mentioned. We already have, a phased evolution of intelligent networks, right? Analytics, big data. Even today we have AI. Of course, that takes its course together with feasibility, together with other things that need to be done to reduce complexity, create more intelligence. So in schools, it takes end to end once we understand the journey to provide that value. It takes an end to end, which is everybody. But in ICT, as I said, it's important to ride that journey that we have started.
Right. And in terms of actual skills, Dale, perhaps you can comment what you think you're looking for in terms of future college graduates. I heard from some of the other comments, it's not just about engineering skills, not just software skills, but perhaps design skills from a media design perspective. Perhaps as 6G becomes more tactile, haptic, about experience. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to kind of maybe pick up on some of the last responses to the last question, I think just the user experience aspect of things, right? Of how the users interact with the technology. I think, we've talked about this 6G and bringing the experience factor to the user, but, saying that and actually bringing that to reality is a very difficult thing. How do you take a piece of hardware or a piece of software and make it easy to use, such that it's just a seamless operation that happens between the user and the technology? That's a whole school of thought. And, there are some good universities, that are able to do that. And there's a lot of other folks that are not very good at that. So I think being able to get folks engaged with that early on, I think another thing I'll mention is, I think over the past 10, 20 years, industry has done a very good job with creating relationships with universities, right? That part of the ecosystem, I think, is very rich. I think interacting with that tier below, the high school kids and the middle school kids, getting them engaged earlier and right when the timing is right, is probably lacking a bit. I think we could do a better job at that point. Yeah.
So we've talked about skills to some degree and some of the work that needs to be done. What other kind of factors do we need to have in alignment to ensure that, certainly in North America, that momentum, that 6G momentum continues? Perhaps, Congresswoman, you could comment on that.
I'm sorry, I can't. I gotta go. I'm 10 minutes late already. I'm sorry. Thank you for having me on the panel, but I would like to come back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming and joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Okay, so I think it's for the rest of us to answer some of these questions. And of course, we have quite a few from the audience as well. But certainly, let's talk about some of these factors that need to be put into place. So the skills, what else needs to be in place? Linkage with universities, with the research environment. What else do we need to have ensure is in place?
Yeah, I think those are definitely some good starts, right? I think what we're doing in terms of aligning the industry bodies now is also very key. Working with government. So I'm glad that Congresswoman could be part of this.
And when you say industry bodies, you mean vertical industries, so that we actually understand the specific needs of industry use cases, industry
Yeah, and
needs, right?
I would even take it a step further. I would say the typical industry specification groups that exist today through HPP, ITU, otherwise, and then bringing in the actual industrial verticals that could provide input to us, right? So how will we know what they need? It's by understanding from them, right? Bringing them into the picture now will help us with that.
That shouldn't be so extraordinary, should it, to involve those industrial verticals, eh?
Well, can I add to that? Yeah, Jovan.
Please do.
Yes, of course. At Bell and others, we have been working very closely, and we grow that as well. I want to speak for the entire ecosystem, if I may. I mean, global industry. We have come a long way with respect to engagement of verticals, but we still have a long way ahead of us. Part of it is natural in terms of the transformation, in terms of the expectations, and the right expectations, the taste of the meaning of coverage, for example, for automotive, for agriculture, for others, and reliability, as well, to make sure that delivery is possible. You know, having that zero latency you mentioned in a small bandwidth in a factory, it's one thing, but having it everywhere is another. That is why you deliver what is needed where it is needed. So I want to emphasize on the opportunity and celebrate what we have done. And today, as some of the colleagues mentioned, some of the peer panelists, even when you go to 3GPP and others, you already see the representation, a good representation of verticals, whether it's energy, automotive, public safety, and others. And also, we at NGMN, we had in our 5G paper throughout 2014, which was published at the beginning of 15, a lot of emphasis on this, and we immediately had some initiatives to engage. And then 5G AA and others were formed. They have come a long way, but together, not just us, but together with vertical industry, I think we are in belief that we need more work to do.
Absolutely. Of course, understanding the different industries are working on a different timeline, perhaps. Some will jump ahead, some are way behind. Some are impatient in their own way. Perhaps that's why we see more private 5G developments in industries such as manufacturing, because they want the benefits of that zero latency and control and security earlier than is potentially obtainable in a public context. And to the point about what foundational levels, there's some comments from the audience, certainly about security and privacy, that those aspects need to be built in inherently into 6G. And what is being done, a question is really what's being done for that foundational element, so people can understand that there is privacy, there is security built into 6G. Can anyone comment on that, as we are still in the process of defining 6G? Dale, it sounds like it looks like you have a few thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're at in the 6G kind of life cycle, if you will, is we're at the very beginning, we're at the very start. So we're in the pre-standardization phase, if you will, and we're taking a look at a lot of use cases, a lot of requirements, and a lot of that is not at the technology level, it's at the societal and user level as well. And I think that's where we can get an early jump on things like security and security concerns, security requirements, as well as a host of other things like what are the societal needs of what 6G needs to accomplish. So I think this is what I've noticed is a bit different. You know, the amount of participation and the amount of momentum and collaboration that's happening around 6G. It seems like every generation we get to start on things a little bit sooner, and we learn from prior mistakes or just retrospective things. And that's what I'm very encouraged by 6G, is just the early jump that we're seeing on it. Yeah.
You bring up a very important point, which is learning from prior mistakes. And I'm hearing perhaps that one of those, well, not mistakes, is we need to include more stakeholders from different industries. That's one thing. What mistakes do you think have been done that we need to avoid, without naming names or anything of that basis? But what types of things should we be sure to get done and isolate ourselves, or what other things should we do? Jeremy, do you have any thoughts? Having been in the industry for some time, what's really critical to avoid repeating?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of boils down to what those drivers are going to be from industry. The most critical that I could think of is not taking the industry's input into account now. If we just continue to go in the same way that we've gone in the past and create use cases and kind of drive technology from that perspective instead of getting the view from industry itself, I think we'll go down a road that won't serve as much as we could. And that's really where 6G is heading right now. We're bringing in industry, we're getting input, we're talking to government, and we're kind of doing all the things that we can now to gain a good perspective of what society will need.
Okay, so this is all fundamental work that needs to be done. Cleaning house, making sure that it's a safe environment, building dialogues with other industries, understanding what their momentum, what their needs are, their key performance indicators. What about some of the basic commercial aspects? There are a number of questions from the audience, and as we all have been discussing. So we've talked about who can benefit. We've talked about, the perhaps competitive environment. But really, have we drawn out what the difference is between, let's say, if we wanted to call it this, the competition today is 5G. What is the dividing line, where 6G takes over where 5G cannot yet perform? What do we believe? What do we expect that to be? There's a lot of questions around autonomous vehicles in that type of context. Let's take this on and really start exploring where 6G can go beyond 5G. Javan, let me throw this over to you first, and we'll go through the rest of the group.
Well, I'm going to be a little predictable. I guess we have a long way ahead of us, and including 5G maturity and full 5G vision. Of course, I don't want to be naive about full 5G vision, because a lot of times the vision spills over the next generation. And when it comes to requirement tables and all that, it takes its course of reality in terms of standard phases and ecosystem and research and so on. So to begin with, the line is not that clear, like in terms of what you call 5G and when it becomes 6G. In many ways, we can expect a magnitude of change in what is possible value proposition and as such also enablers. For example, if the totality of this man-machine and automation and other things can provide a simple thing such as a global coverage, that is not just digital inclusion, that is not just a 50, 100 megabit per second at the minimum for everybody. It also means putting services on top of it. It also means enterprise. So I would say to be sensitive, as Jeremy also said, to some of those drivers in terms of societal needs, differentiated new market opportunities, a new way of delivering that goes along with green and targets and energy efficiency. At some point, I guess it needs new possibilities, new paradigms, and right now there is all this timeline about, for example, 2030, a year earlier or later. But that doesn't mean today we have all the business case and all the market clearly defined for that. It's also the course of things to guide the ecosystem and research. So I would say new possibilities, in terms of society and market opportunities and delivery. But we also have to work together to make sure it is just that.
Okay, Jeremy, from your perspective, can you think of some where you think there might be an issue with the dividing line between what 5G and 6G can do? Is it about the scale of what can be managed, the coordination? Is it something along those lines?
I think that plays that definitely plays into it. I mean, we're just emerging at really what 5G can bring today, right? We talked about how you can get multiple gigabits per second on your handset today. Hundreds of megahertz of spectrum available at any given time, right? So in a year or two, when we get to 10 gigabits per second, right, that'll become commonplace, right? All these use cases that we talk about today will just be business as usual. It'll come with every single phone. Now, I think the most important point here is that we don't want to just focus on the cellular technology of what 6G has, right? Because in 10 years' time, other technology areas will have advanced as well. Display technologies will have advanced. The ability to do projections will have advanced. Camera quality, battery life. The other parts of the economy and the digital economy will have grown as well. So those applications that would come as part of that are probably still to be determined. But if you really think about what that could bring, maybe we talk about the connected healthcare segment, and we have remote surgeries in 5G. But what if every single hospital and every room in that hospital is connected virtually with, let's say, 5G? Maybe that's not enough bandwidth. Maybe that's where we see the vision of 6G kind of taking over, is this massive amount of video or massive amount of data. It could be robotic surgery, it could be augmented reality or holographic interactions with other people. So imagine taking your phone and having a holographic interaction with anyone you want, anywhere, and everybody doing that at the same time. That's really where the massive part of 6G has a potential.
I don't think we've talked enough about situational awareness, 360-degree situational awareness, which is something that is being strived for and to some degree obtained in public safety. What if that applied to every single industry and to our entire lives? That is where I think the rubber hits the road, is perhaps the expression to use, where 5G will run out of horsepower and 6G will take over. If we expect 360-degree situational awareness about everything, and then we become a lot more predictive in what in activity. Perhaps that's what we need to explore and haven't thought about enough. Dale, what do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely, the scaling out and the scaling up, and when does 5G run out of gas, right? Everybody's debating what that will be. And I think, as Jeremy said, I've said in this presentation, is the story still being written about 5G, right? We're now just deploying the networks. We're now getting all of the services kind of starting to be developed in the applications. So I think that's a little bit of a TBD. And but it's still very interesting to think about. I think another aspect to kind of throw at you and to think about as well is maybe scaling down 5G from the perspective of, I brought up sustainability in the past, earlier in the conversation. If we take a look at 5G and maybe where some shortcomings are, maybe another way to think about it is scaling down 5G such that it can be more sustainable. If you look at the sustainability goals that are being looked at, a lot of them will involve technology like cellular in order to bring those sustainability goals to fruition. We need to monitor the air, the water. We're going to need sensor devices that have a very low carbon footprint and energy consumption level. So one thing that my company is looking at is there a way where we can actually scale down cellular devices such that these devices can run without a battery? They can be ultra low power, and they can basically run for decades or maybe indefinitely, and be able to monitor things that today require a device where we need to swap out the batteries, every few months, which has a huge carbon footprint, right? So taking a look at the perspective of 5G from that perspective is also interesting. It's not necessarily a scale up question, it's more of a scale down. And again, that gets back to looking at 6G from just a broader perspective than just technology. What are the societal needs of 6G? And where are some places where we're coming up a bit short? And I think it's interesting to think about that, because if you take a look at various technology companies, as well as all types of companies, they're now starting to develop a little bit of a conscious around their product, what they're putting out there. And I think the opportunity is really ripe for some really cool innovation and technology to make its way into 6G that doesn't necessarily align with higher bandwidth, lower latency, but maybe solves some bigger problems that we have as well.
And those are excellent points. And of course, in many countries, we are being regulated and we are being fined if our footprint, our carbon footprint, is beyond a certain level or we haven't reduced it. So that sustainability aspect, which is something that is built into 6G, that some of the energy consumption around that is a very fine point, which might drive, accelerate its adoption. Javan, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. If you allow me, just a couple of points that also was mentioned by Dale, but yes, definitely. And this is, as you know, it's not just we all follow the regulations, right? It's also about the broader thing that ICT can do, not just for itself, but for other sectors, right? So it becomes part of that environmental sustainability targets that have been discussed globally. And operators, along with partners and others, from equipment to procedures to operation, making their contribution. In fact, the contribution to other sectors are much greater. So that's definitely part of this, and it is part of the 6G. As also mentioned earlier, we are at early stages, just like security is a must from design. In fact, it must be integrated with operation, not operation management and then security management. It must be one thing, but we are early in. But it's a requirement from the start. If you allow me, I think it was very well covered that the drivers that we mentioned, societal is important here. The market opportunities, like such as some of the use cases that can be imagined. Sometimes it's easier to imagine the next decade than try to argue the line between 5G and 6G. Like, let's just assume that we will have these possibilities in terms of telepresence, in terms of collaborative robots, and so on. One last thing is range of requirements, because it's not just about high throughput or zero latency. It's about respecting what every application needs. It may be very low data rate, 15, 20 years of battery life, and an occasional transmission. And then again, you have a stadium or a train on a normal day, hopefully soon, full of people doing upload and download of high quality video. Respecting what is needed when it is needed is important.
But perhaps the new standard will be that it's not about uploading and downloading or respecting different applications. The capacity will be there to do it all the time. That may be the new way of thinking, because after all, we seem to be developing consumers that are less like Oliver Twist asking for a little bit more, and more like Homer Simpson, who expect more all of the time. Correct? Isn't that the consumer?
If I may add, you're absolutely right. But we also notice there are two tiers. One is the availability, right, and scalability and capacity. The other thing is when a sensor, a tag needs, a little bit of cost, a little bit of power, a little bit of data. We have to make sure that we be able to adapt to that.
Okay, and there are a couple of comments I noticed from the audience. I think there's perhaps a lack of awareness of what actually 6G can do, the power budget and the cost benefits of 6G. That is an operator benefit, but it also can be extended beyond that. I don't know if anyone wants to just quickly comment on that, just so we touch on that point, because there is that environmental benefit is perhaps sustainability benefits perhaps not that well known. Dale, do you just want to quickly comment on that?
Yeah, just real quick, I'll jump in, because I liked what Javan had mentioned about, adaptability and scaling up and down. We need the bandwidth when we need it, and we don't need the bandwidth when we don't need it, right? Because otherwise we're just going to be wasting resources. So
that's sustainable.
Yes, the ability for networks to be able to scale, not just at the core network level, but perhaps all the way at the edge, right? And being able to do that on a use case specific manner, based off of when users need the bandwidth, when they don't, or when devices need it, or when they don't. I think that whole dynamic aspect and interplay there creates a lot of challenges from a technology perspective, some of which are, of course, deployment centric challenges, others of which I think will make their way all the way back into the standards to make sure that the architecture and the technology that's being developed there has the tools in the toolbox, if you will, to support the operators and the service providers on what they need in order to make that happen.
Right. And to that point also, let's not forget that this requires also not just 6G, but the interplay of a range of other technologies. And we haven't touched on that point. You've mentioned edge. I think it's just worth touching on the fact that 6G will not be a standalone solution. It will be part of integrated with other technologies to deliver the services and solutions to enterprise. We've talked about AI, we've talked a little bit about edge. What else should we be aware of? We've talked about battery technology as a requirement, improving that. What else is relevant in that 6G environment to take the market forwards?
Well, I think another thing is just the whole data aspect of things, right? It's just not a connectivity equation anymore. It's a lot about the content and the data and where that's flowing and how it flows and where does the data actually reside and when. So I think we're kind of seeing a merging of the connectivity worlds and the data distribution worlds, and we're seeing that in 5G. That's not going to be anything that is going to be new to 6G, but I think 6G, just to scale, getting back to the scale question, scaling up, it's going to have to solve and improve upon what's being done today in order to have that seamless feel and look to the user experience. So I think that's another aspect that we definitely need to consider.
Okay, and Jeremy, from your perspective, what do you think are the sort of allied technology developments that will support 6G and make it part of the outcomes we want to deliver?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with a lot of that, and kind of what we're looking at today with on-demand networks, right? You talk something about power efficiency and how things scale, cloud, edge. When you talk about computing at that kind of level, you're really looking at how things can be brought up and taken down very easily. We're starting to do that today with 5G, bringing up resources as we need, network resources as we need. But we're also living in an environment of a legacy world where we still have racks of equipment that are turned on at all times, and we haven't fully migrated to that. So in some years' time, maybe we will have gotten there with 5G, but it will certainly be part of the foundations of 6G. And I don't think you'll get to all the sustainability goals that we're really looking for unless you start with that from the start.
Okay, and of course, that is something that governments may help with as well, encourage us further by making sure that we don't use certain fuels and take other steps in different countries. And actually, one thing we haven't covered, I know our focus has been largely on North America, but to what degree we need to coordinate globally to ensure that 6G is successful. Can we talk a little bit about that? Javan, perhaps talk a little bit from your perspective.
Sure. The experience shows, and also at NGMN we represent that, Bell and others working together. We cannot do this without global harmony, right? We cannot promote fragmentation. So it's important that regional leadership also means not falling behind, right? But we can do what we can in terms of leadership and competition and creativity and innovation. But global harmony is front and center and important, and fragmentation does not help the end.
Fragmentation either from spectrum regulation or
standards
or skills,
approaches, use cases.
Jeremy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's nothing wrong with driving technology from wherever that may be, right? Right now, we're focused on North American use cases, the needs of society and the economic needs from a North American perspective. And I don't think that there's anything wrong in driving that right now, because that's what we know. Those are the people that we interact with. That's who we're trying to help address now. But as you look forward, you're not going to get the economies of scale to hit all of these sustainability goals unless you really have a global ecosystem. And I think we all recognize that it's going to take a global ecosystem of 6G to realize a lot of this potential. And that's something we're definitely going to embrace.
Okay. And Dale, from your perspective, obviously InterDigital is working globally. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think from the cellular domain perspective, and it's if you take a step back, it's a bright spot kind of in the fact that if you look at what's been done, from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G and now 6G, is I think that international stage and cohesiveness has gotten better and better with each generation. And I only hope that, and see that continues, moving in that direction. And it's often used as a model, as an example of some of the benefits and some of the outcomes that can happen if you can operate at that international level. So, yeah.
Okay, so in terms of building the 6G value proposition, we've said between us that we think that everyone can benefit, be they consumers or be they enterprises. We've mentioned a few industries. We've talked about transportation, we've talked about healthcare, we've talked about utilities, public safety. And the types of problems that we're trying to solve are about situational awareness, they're about reducing latency, getting predictive. What else? Those are the things that we're anticipating building, correct? Services around those, solving those type of propositions. Is that where you're seeing the future? Well,
Yeah,
it's early days still, but certainly
yeah,
it's more than just connectivity. I think we can agree, right?
right. And I think what a lot of people are kind of waiting and seeing is, how much of that gets done in 5G before we start to run out of gas, as I've been saying, right? And where do we need to pass the baton over to the 6G, generation where we could solve some of those shortcomings? And, I think there's some data points, and we have some ideas of where that may happen, but some of that is still, it's going to get shook out over the next few years, and we'll get smarter and smarter about it. Yeah.
And 5G will not go away.
Oh no, and I hate to describe 5G as the competition, but it's about, once we have actually tested the absolute limits of 5G in terms of device management, complexity, the cost of devices, the battery issues, the location, what can you do when you've got better location knowledge, all of that, and not least some of the environmental sustainability pressures that were brought up by Dale and others today. Let me ask you a couple of ticklish questions before we finish. If we think about the transition from 4G to 5G and from 5G to 6G, today are consumers paying more for 5G than they did for 4G? I don't think that's the case, is it? So can we expect the 6G buyer to pay more for 6G? I'd be interested to get some views on that.
Right, I don't think so. I think everything that we're doing today is to enable more people to connect, and it's people from all parts of society. So it's not just those that could pay $2,000 for a phone. It's enabling technologies, future-looking technologies in all price tiers. And that's something that we're very conscious of today, enabling 5G on multiple types of product lines with multiple price points. And I don't think, I see that stopping at 6G. As a matter of fact, that's something that we were talking about recently, is how do we make sure 6G is not going to price out people's ability to access, and what do we need to do there? So we have to think about low-cost devices right from the beginning. There needs to be tiers, or there needs to be different ways to get connectivity with 6G so that anyone can access it.
And so the final motivation must certainly not to exclude, but to include. However, perhaps if the proposition is not connectivity, but experience, people would pay more for that holographic experience than they would for just getting a fast connection. Maybe that's what we need to explore next going forwards in the 6G space. Dale, what are your thoughts? You think about the number one thing that needs to happen going forwards to ensure that 6G is successful. Go on.
I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for differentiation and upselling, and as far as the types of services and the bells and whistles, with regards to, you mentioned holographics, and so I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. But maybe to Jeremy's point as well, is we can't forget about the customers that just need some of the more table stakes type technology that they can't get left behind, right? So I think both audiences and markets need to be addressed. Yeah.
And Javan, from your perspective, making sure we connect those that are still unconnected. Hopefully 5G will do that, so 6G will do something else. Is that correct, Javan?
Yeah, as I said, that's one of the key drivers, and in general, societal, including digital inclusion, and then there's sides to there are caveats to that. One is it takes everything to do that. It takes the technologies, enablers, complexity and cost efficiency, energy efficiency for all of us to make that as a key imperative. And then it's not going to just leave at that, because also verticals require that, enterprise requires that, a lot of applications require that.
And just to close, if I could ask each of the panelists very quickly to say, what do they think is the number one task that needs to be, that you want to see progress on, that will convince you that 6G is on track, either from a short-term or a long-term perspective? What is the number one thing that needs to be done, in your view? Let me throw it over to Jeremy.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think we kind of touched upon this before, but I think the number one thing that we can do at this point, given how early we are, is to keep communication channels open with industry, with government, with other parts of society that we need to address. And it's that communication channel that will allow us to understand what the deficiencies are with our current technology, and how we can better address society as a whole, individuals, governments, businesses, as we get into 6G. That's the key for me.
Dale, just quickly.
Yeah, I know we're short on time, so I will just say +1 to what Jeremy said there. Yeah.
And Javan, I'm sure you're much in agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely in agreement. And may I say that the research keeps an open mind. We have to respect that, but we also have to be aware of the imperatives and the drivers and the value proposition.
I am sure that we will be continuing to talk about this, not only this year, but in years to come. And all I can say is thank you very much to all of the panelists and all of the audience asking questions. We will continue this conversation, but thank you for now for your great participation in this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Camille, for chairing. Yeah.
Thank you.